The invitation sat on the mahogany conference table like a piece of evidence at a trial. Cream-colored cardstock with gold-embossed lettering announced the union of Trevor Ashford and Victoria Chen. Except someone had drawn a thick red X through it. I watched from my desk as Trevor's mother, Diane, slid it across to him with a look of distaste. "A secretary," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You're marrying a secretary. Do you understand how that looks to our circle?" Trevor shifted in his chair, not meeting her eyes. "Mom, it's not like that. Victoria's different." Diane laughed coldly. "Different? Darling, you're about to inherit your father's real estate empire. You need someone with connections, with pedigree. Not some girl who answers phones." My hands froze over my keyboard. I was sitting 20 feet away at my desk in the outer office, supposedly invisible behind the frosted glass partition. But every word carried through the quiet morning air. Trevor said nothing to defend me. The silence stretched on like a wound that wouldn't close. That's when I knew everything was about to change. My name is Victoria Chen, though most people at Ashford Properties knew me simply as Vicky, the executive secretary. I'd worked there for 3 years, managing schedules, coordinating meetings, and keeping the office running smoothly. Trevor and I had started dating 18 months ago after a chance encounter at a company charity gala. He'd been charming, attentive, and seemingly different from the entitled rich kids I'd grown up watching from afar. We'd gotten engaged 6 months later at a beachside restaurant. The ring was modest by his family's standards but felt like a promise to me. Now that promise was crumbling. I'd arrived early that Monday to prepare for a major client presentation. The Ashfords were pitching to the Grayson Corporation, a billion-dollar development firm looking for a local partner. It was the biggest deal of the year. I'd organized every detail, from the catering to the projection setup. But as I listened to Diane's venomous words, my focus shifted. I pulled up my phone and sent a single text to my lawyer. "Time to move forward." Trevor finally emerged from the conference room an hour later. His face pale. He walked past my desk without looking at me. "Vicky, can we talk? Tonight?" I kept my expression neutral. "I have plans. Please. It's important." His voice cracked slightly. I glanced up, meeting his eyes for the first time that morning. They looked guilty, uncertain. Fine. 7 o'clock. The cafe on 5th. He nodded quickly and retreated to his office. I watched him go, feeling something cold settle in my chest. For 3 years I'd played the part perfectly. The quiet secretary. The girlfriend who didn't ask too many questions. The fiancé was content to plan a simple wedding while his family whispered behind closed doors. But Trevor had no idea who I really was. Nobody did. And that was exactly how I'd wanted it. My phone buzzed with a reply from my attorney. "Documents ready. Awaiting your signal." I smiled faintly and returned to my work, typing up the agenda for tomorrow's Grayson meeting with steady, practiced fingers. The rest of the day passed in a blur of phone calls and paperwork. I fielded questions from vendors, confirmed appointments, and kept my head down. Trevor's assistant, a nervous young man named Ben, stopped by my desk twice to ask if I was okay. "You seem quiet today," he said. I forced a smile. "Just focused." Around 3 o'clock, Diane swept through the office again, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She didn't acknowledge me, but I felt her eyes linger as she passed. She'd always treated me like furniture, useful but forgettable. That was about to change. At 5:30, I gathered my things and locked my desk. On my way out, I paused by the bulletin board in the break room. Someone had pinned up a photo from last year's holiday party. Trevor and I stood together, his arm around my shoulders, both of us smiling. I unpinned it and slipped it into my purse. Evidence of a life I was about to leave behind. The elevator ride down felt longer than usual. I stepped into the cool evening air and walked toward the cafe, my mind already racing through what I needed to say. Trevor was already waiting when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 untouched coffees in front of him. He stood when he saw me, awkward and anxious. Thanks for coming. I sat down without taking off my coat. What did you want to talk about? He rubbed his face, clearly exhausted. My mother. She's being difficult. About us. I heard. His eyes widened. You heard. The walls at the office aren't as thick as you think. Trevor winced. Vicky, I'm sorry. I should have defended you. She caught me off guard. I sipped the coffee he'd ordered for me. It was cold. What did she say after I left? He hesitated. She wants me to reconsider the wedding. She thinks it's bad for the family image if I marry someone without a certain background. Without money, you mean? That's not what That's exactly what you mean, Trevor. My voice was calm, but my hands were shaking. He reached across the table, but I pulled back. I love you, Vicky. Do. But my family's legacy is complicated. There are expectations. I stared at him for a long moment, watching him squirm under the weight of his own words. So what are you saying? Trevor took a deep breath. I think we should postpone the wedding. Just for a little while. Give my mother time to come around. Postpone. The word tasted bitter. You mean cancel? No. Just delay it. Maybe 6 months, a year. A year. I laughed softly, shaking my head. And what happens in a year, Trevor? Does your mother magically accept me? Or do you find another excuse? His jaw tightened. That's not fair. Fair. I stood up, grabbing my purse. You want to talk about fair? I've spent 3 years watching you build your career on your father's name while I did the actual work keeping that office running. And now you're telling me I'm not good enough because I don't come from the right family. Trevor looked stricken. It's not like that. It's exactly like that. I turned to leave, then paused. For the record, I'm not postponing anything. If you want to end this, have the guts to say it. He said nothing. I walked out into the night, my heart pounding. I didn't go home. Instead, I drove across town to a sleek glass building overlooking the harbor. The lobby was empty except for a security guard who nodded as I passed. I took the elevator to the top floor and used my keycard to access the executive suite. The lights flickered on automatically, illuminating a sprawling office with floor-to-ceiling windows. My office. I'd bought this building 5 years ago under a shell company, one of several properties I owned throughout the city. My legal name on the documents was Victoria Maylin Chen, but in the business world, I operated through a network of LLCs and investment firms. Most people had no idea that the quiet secretary at Ashford Properties was also one of the largest private real estate investors in the region. I'd inherited a modest fortune from my grandmother, a savvy immigrant who'd built her wealth through careful investments and hard work. She'd taught me young. Never let anyone see your full hand. So I'd played small, taken a low-profile job and watched. And learned. Now it was time to stop watching. I opened my laptop and pulled up the files my lawyer had sent. Everything was ready. Tomorrow the game will change. The Grayson Corporation meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock. I arrived at Ashford Properties at 8, as usual, and began setting up the conference room. Trevor avoided me, staying locked in his office. Diane arrived at 9, dressed in a sharp designer suit. She swept past my desk without a word. At 9:45, the Grayson team arrived. 3 executives in tailored suits, led by a woman named Patricia Delgado. I greeted them warmly and offered coffee. Patricia smiled at me. You must be Victoria. We've heard wonderful things. I blinked surprised. From whom? From Richard Grayson himself. He speaks very highly of your work. Before I could respond, Trevor appeared, all smiles and confidence. Ms. Delgado, welcome. Shall we? They filed into the conference room. I followed, taking my usual seat in the corner with my laptop, ready to take notes. Trevor launched into his pitch, displaying glossy renderings of a mixed-use development project. Diane chimed in occasionally, emphasizing the Ashford family legacy. But I noticed Patricia's attention drifting. She kept glancing at me. Finally, she interrupted Trevor mid-sentence. I'm sorry, but I need to clarify something. Who's leading this project? Trevor frowned. I am. With my mother's guidance, of course. Patricia exchanged a look with her colleagues. That's not what we were told. Trevor's smile faltered. I'm sorry. We were under the impression that Victoria Chen was the primary contact for this development. The room went silent. Diane's face turned crimson. Trevor stared at me, confused. I set down my pen carefully. There's been a misunderstanding, I said quietly. Patricia shook her head. No misunderstanding. Richard Grayson specifically requested to work with you. He said you handled the due diligence on our Seattle project last year. Is that correct? I nodded slowly. Yes. I consulted on that deal. Consulted? Patricia smiled. You structured the entire financing package. Richard said it was the smoothest acquisition he'd ever done. Trevor's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Diane looked like she'd been slapped. I stood smoothing my skirt. Perhaps we should talk privately, Ms. Delgado. She nodded. I think that would be wise. As we left the room, I felt Trevor's eyes burning into my back. But I didn't look back. Not yet. Patricia and I walked to my desk. She glanced around the modest workspace, clearly puzzled. This is where you work. For now, I said. She studied me for a moment, then lowered her voice. Richard wanted me to ask if you're interested in a more formal partnership. He's been impressed with your discretion. I appreciate that. But I prefer to keep a low profile. Patricia nodded. Understood. However, I think you should know. Ashford Properties isn't our first choice for this project. We came here as a courtesy because Richard wanted to meet with you. If you're not leading the deal, we'll look elsewhere. My pulse quickened. This was the moment. Give me 24 hours, I said. I'll have a proposal for you. She smiled. I look forward to it. After they left, I returned to the conference room. Trevor and Diane were arguing in hushed, furious tones. They stopped when they saw me. What the hell was that? Trevor demanded. I met his gaze calmly. That was business. Diane stood, her face twisted with rage. You had no right to interfere. I didn't interfere. They came here to see me. You're a secretary. I smiled faintly. Actually, I'm not. The next morning I didn't go to Ashford Properties. Instead, I sent an email to Trevor and Diane from my corporate account, one they'd never seen before. The subject line read, Proposal for Grayson Development Partnership. I attached a full pitch deck, complete with financing structures, timelines, and risk assessments. At the bottom, I included my signature. Victoria M. Chen, Principal, Chen Ventures LLC. Then I copied Patricia Delgado and waited. The response came within an hour. Trevor called my cell phone 11 times. I ignored every call. Finally, he sent a text. We need to talk. Now. I replied simply. I'm done talking. At noon, my lawyer called. They're panicking. Diane Ashford's attorney reached out, asking if you're planning legal action. I laughed. For what? Breach of contract, apparently. She claims you used company resources for personal business. That's absurd. I worked on the Seattle deal on my own time, with my own money. I know. But she's scared. They all are. I leaned back in my chair, gazing out at the city skyline. Good. Let them be scared. That afternoon, Patricia called. Your proposal is excellent. We'd like to move forward with you. Not with Ashford Properties. Correct. I spent the next week working from my private office, finalizing the Grayson deal. Patricia and her team were efficient and professional. We hammered out terms quickly, and within days the contract was signed. Chen Ventures would lead the development. Ashford Properties was out. The news hit the industry like a bomb. Trade publications ran headlines about the mysterious investor who'd swooped in to steal a billion-dollar deal. Speculation swirled about who I was and how I'd built my portfolio so quietly. Trevor left me a voicemail. His voice tight with anger. You sabotaged us. You destroyed my family's reputation. I don't know who you are anymore. I listened to it once, then deleted it. Diane, meanwhile, tried a different approach. She sent an email requesting a meeting, her tone polite but cold. We should discuss this situation like adults, she wrote. I didn't reply. The truth was I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction. Just a quiet sense of closure. They'd shown me exactly who they were. Now I was showing them who I was. And I was done playing small. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in a downtown restaurant when Trevor walked in. I'd agreed to meet him one last time, mostly out of curiosity. He looked thinner, his face drawn. He slid into the booth across from me without a word. For a long moment we just stared at each other. Why didn't you tell me? He finally asked. Tell you what? That you were wealthy. That you owned half the city. That you were. He gestured helplessly. This. I sipped my water. Would it have mattered? Of course it would have. Why? Because then I'd be acceptable to your mother. Trevor flinched. That's not fair. It's exactly fair. I leaned forward. You were ready to cancel our wedding because you thought I wasn't good enough. 'Cause I was just a secretary. But the moment you found out I had money, suddenly I'm worth reconsidering. He looked away. It's not about the money. Yes, Trevor. It is. He was silent for a long time. Then quietly. I loved you. You loved the idea of me, I corrected. The version that fit neatly into your world. But you never really saw me. Trevor's hands clenched on the table. That's not true. I did see you. I just didn't know everything. You didn't want to know everything, I said. You wanted someone convenient. Someone who wouldn't challenge you. He shook his head. I made a mistake. I see that now. But you lied to me too. I never lied. I just didn't volunteer information you never asked for. That's a technicality. I smiled sadly. No. It's survival. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in weeks. What happens now? Now. I stood picking up my purse. Now we both move on. You run your family's company. I run mine. Vicky. It's Victoria, I interrupted. Only my friends call me Vicky. His face crumpled. I'm sorry. I know. I left him sitting there, alone in the booth. As I walked out into the sunlight, I felt lighter than I had in years. The weight of pretending was finally gone. And I was free. The Grayson project moved forward smoothly. Patricia and I met weekly to review progress. And the development quickly became one of the most talked about ventures in the city. Media outlets requested interviews, but I declined them all. I'd spent too long in the shadows to suddenly crave the spotlight. Instead, I focused on expanding Chen Ventures. I acquired 2 more properties, funded a startup incubator, and quietly began mentoring young women in real estate. My grandmother would have been proud. One afternoon, I received a LinkedIn message from Ben, Trevor's assistant. I just wanted to say thank you, he wrote. You taught me more in 3 years than I learned in business school. I hope you're doing well. I smiled and replied, You're going to do great things, Ben. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. It was the first time in weeks I'd felt genuinely happy. I realized I'd been holding my breath for so long, waiting for something to break. Now that it had, I could finally breathe. Ashford Properties struggled in the months that followed. Without the Grayson deal, their projections fell short. Diane tried to pivot, courting smaller clients, but the damage to their reputation was done. Word spread that they'd lost a major contract to a competitor, one who'd been right under their noses the entire time. Trevor eventually reached out again, this time through a mutual acquaintance. He wanted to apologize officially. I agreed to meet him for coffee, mostly because I was curious. He looked better than before, more put together. I've been doing a lot of thinking, he said. About us. About what I did. And I was an idiot. I let my mother dictate my life. I thought I needed her approval to be happy. He nodded. That's fair. I don't expect you to forgive me, he continued. But I wanted you to know that I'm working on myself. I left Ashford Properties. I raised an eyebrow. You did? Yeah. I'm starting my own firm. Something smaller, more personal. For the first time, I saw a glimmer of the person I'd fallen for. Not the entitled heir, but the man who'd once talked passionately about sustainable housing. Good for you, Trevor. We talked for another hour, the conversation easier than I'd expected. He asked about my work, and I shared some of my plans for Chen Ventures. He listened, genuinely interested. You're incredible, he said finally. I wish I'd seen it sooner. You saw what I let you see, I replied. I hid on purpose. Why? Thought about it. Because I wanted to be valued for who I was, not what I had. He nodded slowly. That makes sense. Before we parted, he asked, do you think we could ever be friends? Smiled. Maybe. Someday. As I walked away, I felt a sense of peace. Not because I'd forgiven him. Not yet. But because I'd let go of the anger. And that felt like victory enough. 6 months later, Chen Ventures was thriving. The Grayson project broke ground, and I was invited to the ceremony. Patricia gave a speech crediting my vision and leadership. Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled notes. This time I didn't hide. I stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd, and spoke about my grandmother. About the lessons she'd taught me. About the importance of building quietly and wisely. When I finished, the applause was deafening. Afterward, a young woman approached me. She was nervous, clutching a business card. Ms. Chen, I just wanted to say thank you. I read about your work, and it inspired me to start my own company. I took her card, smiling. Tell me about it. We talked for 20 minutes. By the end, I'd agreed to mentor her. As she walked away, I felt my grandmother's presence, like a hand on my shoulder. This was what it was all about. Not revenge. Not proving anyone wrong. But building something that mattered. And helping others do the same. A year after the breakup, I received an invitation to Trevor's wedding. I stared at it for a long time, unsure how to feel. He was marrying someone named Claire, a woman I didn't know. The ceremony was small, intimate. I almost didn't go. But something made me RSVP yes. On the day of the wedding, I arrived late, slipping into a back pew. Trevor looked happy, genuinely happy. Claire was radiant, laughing as they exchanged vows. I felt a pang of something. Not jealousy but nostalgia. For what we'd had and what we'd lost. After the ceremony, Trevor spotted me. He walked over, eyes wide. You came. I did. He smiled a little sadly. Thank you. You look happy, I said. I am. She's good for me. He nodded. I'm glad. We stood there awkwardly for a moment. Then Claire appeared, taking his arm. Is this Victoria? Trevor nodded. Claire smiled warmly. I've heard so much about you. Thank you for coming. I shook her hand. Congratulations. As I left, I felt a weight lift. The past was finally behind me. And the future was wide open. The business world began recognizing my name. Awards followed. Woman Entrepreneur of the Year, Rising Star in Real Estate. I accepted them graciously but remained humble. My grandmother had taught me that pride was dangerous. So I kept working, kept building. Chen Ventures expanded into affordable housing, a passion project close to my heart. I wanted to create opportunities for people like my grandmother, immigrants and working families who needed a chance. The work was fulfilling in a way nothing else had been. One evening, I was reviewing blueprints in my office when my assistant buzzed. There's a Diane Ashford here to see you. Froze. Tell her I'm busy. She says it's urgent. Decide. Fine. Send her in. Diane walked in, looking older, tired. She sat down without being invited. I need your help, she said bluntly. I leaned back in my chair, studying her. Why would I help you? Diane's jaw tightened. Because you're a better person than I am. Flattery won't work. It's not flattery. It's the truth. She exhaled slowly. Ashford Properties is failing. We're drowning in debt. Trevor's gone and I don't know what to do. I felt a flicker of sympathy. Just a flicker. What do you want from me? A partnership? Bailout? Anything? I shook my head. I'm not interested. Please. Her voice cracked. I was wrong about you. I see that now. You were more than wrong, I said quietly. You were cruel. Dan looked down. I know. You tried to destroy my relationship because you thought I wasn't good enough. You judged me based on my job title, not my character. I know, she repeated. And I'm sorry. I stood walking to the window. The city stretched out below, glittering in the twilight. I'm not going to bail you out, Diane. Islam. I understand. But, I continued, I'll buy you out. At a fair price. You can retire with dignity. She looked up surprised. Why? I turned to face her. Because holding on to anger is exhausting. And I'm done being angry. The acquisition of Ashford Properties took 3 months. My lawyers handled the details, and by the end, I owned the company outright. I rebranded it, folding it into Chen Ventures. Most of the staff stayed on, including Ben, who I promoted to project manager. Trevor called when he heard the news. You bought my family's company. I did. He laughed, incredulous. That's wow. It's just business, Trevor. Is it? Smiled. Maybe a little bit of justice, too. We talked for a while longer. He congratulated me sincerely. And for the first time I felt like we might actually become friends. As I hung up I realized something. This wasn't about revenge. It never had been. It was about reclaiming my power. And using it to build something better. The next chapter of my life unfolded quickly. Chen Ventures became a powerhouse, known for innovative developments and ethical practices. I hired diverse teams, funded scholarships, and mentored young entrepreneurs. My grandmother's legacy lived on through every project. One day, I received a letter from a tenant in one of my affordable housing complexes. She wrote about how the apartment had changed her life, given her stability, allowed her to go back to school. I read it 3 times, tears streaming down my face. This was why I did it. Not for the accolades or the money, but for moments like this. Real impact, real change. I framed the letter and hung it in my office, a reminder of what mattered. And every time I doubted myself, I looked at it and remembered. I wasn't just a secretary. I wasn't just an investor. I was someone who built bridges, created opportunities, and refused to be defined by anyone else's expectations. Years later, I was invited to speak at a business conference. The audience was packed. Students, entrepreneurs, industry leaders. I took the stage, nervous but determined. My grandmother used to say that the quietest rivers run the deepest. I began. I spent most of my career being quiet, observing, learning. I let people underestimate me because it gave me an advantage. But eventually I realized something. Silence isn't always strength. Sometimes it's just fear. I told them my story. About Trevor, about Diane, about the moment I decided to stop hiding. The greatest power you have, I said, is the power to define yourself. Don't let anyone else write your story. The applause was thunderous. Afterward, dozens of people approached me, sharing their own stories of being underestimated. I listened to each one, offering advice and encouragement. As I left the conference, I felt my grandmother's presence again. She would have been proud, not because I was successful, but because I'd stayed true to myself. And that was the greatest success of all. Today, I sat in my office overlooking the harbor, watching the sun set over the city. Chen Ventures continues to grow, but I've learned to balance work with life. I travel, I volunteer, I spend time with people I love. Trevor and I are friends now, in a distant but genuine way. He's doing well with his firm, and I'm happy for him. Diane retired quietly, and I heard she's volunteering at a women's shelter. Maybe people can change. As for me, I'm still building, still dreaming, still proving that you don't need anyone's approval to create something meaningful. The engagement ring Trevor gave me sits in a drawer somewhere, forgotten. I don't need it anymore. Because I've learned the most important lesson of all. You don't need someone else to validate your worth. You just need the courage to believe in yourself. And once you do that, nothing can stop you. The city lights flicker on below and I smile. This is my empire. Built quietly, carefully, and entirely on my own terms. And I wouldn't have it any other way.